PTSD is a disorder that occurs following exposure to a traumatic event. People with PTSD often have unwanted memories or nightmares. They can also feel upset when they are reminded of their trauma and anxious or on edge. A natural reaction is to avoid by pushing memories away or keeping busy. A veteran with PTSD might also try to avoid people, places, or situations that remind them of their trauma. As we discussed in an earlier video, avoidance is an understandable strategy to help manage symptoms in the short term, but over time, it actually prevents one from recovering. Let's illustrate how avoidance actually maintains symptoms using a different example. We'll turn to George, who avoids something most of us might enjoy. Every year at his family reunion, everyone gets in the hot tub except for George. George has avoided hot tubs for years because the intense heat causes him distress. He desperately wants to join in, but when he has tried to dip his foot in the water, the heat is too intense, and he pulls it out right away. Immediately, George gets relief and reduces his pain by avoiding the hot water. The trouble is that avoiding the hot tub keeps him from participating with his family. Imagine every week for a few years, George does the same thing. What do you think he will experience? That's right, the same pattern over and over. Uncomfortable heat, followed by immediate relief once he takes his toe out. Over time, this becomes a habit, which leads him to believe that he can't handle the heat, and that avoiding hot tubs is the only way to reduce his distress, leading him to continue to avoid them. Avoidance works very similarly in PTSD. If someone has anxiety in certain situations because it reminds them of their trauma, they may leave that situation once they begin to feel too anxious. Again, they learn that avoiding the situation is a way to reduce their distress, and they begin to form a habit of reducing their distress through avoidance. These examples show that avoidance reduces our anxiety, but that this benefit tends to be very short-lived. However, in the long term, anxiety is maintained and many times becomes even more severe. The more someone avoids a situation, the more they inaccurately believe that it is dangerous or that they can't handle it, and the more they begin to fear the situation, leading to increased anxiety over time. As well as worsening distress over time, avoidance can create additional problems and distress that interfere with living a full life. As a veteran opts out of activities with friends, friendships can suffer and in some cases end. Intimate relationships can also suffer, as it can be frustrating when your loved one with PTSD does not want to engage in activities you used to enjoy together. Children can feel hurt and frustrated and pull away from the veteran because their parent is missing from the important events in their life. Other costs of avoidance include feelings of loneliness, guilt, shame, sadness, and anger. Loss of social skills is another cost of continued avoidance, because the more one avoids social interactions, the harder they become, leading to further avoidance. Often, the loved ones of veterans with PTSD end up feeling like the only way to help is to accommodate their avoidance. Routines will get changed to minimize activities or situations that cause them distress. For example, restaurant dinners may be stopped, or family functions and events declined. Family and friends may take over activities that have become too distressing for the veteran. Over time, this can take quite a toll, as the whole family is engaged in the negative cycle of avoidance. Given what we know about the impact of avoidance, it is easy to see that without reducing avoidance, other PTSD symptoms will continue to persist and prevent recovery. That's why one of the primary goals of PTSD treatment is to reduce avoidance by learning to approach these situations that are anxiety-provoking. But how does this work? Well, let's go back to George. What would happen if instead of removing his foot from the hot tub when he felt the heat, he left it in? Well, from our own experiences, we might guess that the sensation of heat is reduced as our body acclimates to the temperature. This process is something we call habituation. If we stay in the hot tub long enough, our body builds a tolerance to the heat and the sensation is much reduced. So, if we coached George to leave his toe in the hot tub, although he would feel heat for a while, over time his body would adjust and build tolerance. George would then learn that he can tolerate the heat, and the sensation of temperature would go down. This will make him more likely to put his foot in again, and again, until eventually he can fully participate in his family reunion. The same thing happens with anxiety. If we stay in a situation that makes us anxious, we habituate to our own emotions. Without doing anything, the intensity of our emotions lessens over time. This is the principle underlying exposure therapy, which is an effective intervention for anxiety disorders and a component of the recommended PTSD treatments. Understandably, it can often be very daunting to begin exposure therapy, especially when the veteran has been using avoidance for a long time. However, being aware of all the costs of avoidance is a critical first step in moving forward. As one begins to approach feared situations rather than avoid them, the process of building tolerance to anxiety and the discovery that one can handle themselves happens quickly, and the veteran starts to reclaim important aspects of their life.